Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast. Zach Barnett, my co-pilot this week from FootballScoop.com. Zach, thanks for joining the Tim May Podcast. Notice I'm just getting right into this flight, my man.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Hey, man, I've been wanting to have you on for a while, and I really have enjoyed following FootballScoop.com, which you ramrod. Is that the correct term, ramrod?
Yeah, I think that's my direction. That's on my business card. I'm the ramrodder.
But you graduated from the University of Texas, so all you guys, the Longhorns, et cetera, you got to learn how to drive those steers, right? I'm right on that too, right?
Yeah, you don't get a diploma unless you can ride a steer.
Hey, ironically, my baby brother, he's 64 years old. Tony has a weekend farm outside LaGrange, Texas, right outside LaGrange, and he has two Longhorns on it. But one of them, I think, is Bear Bryant. His nickname is Bear, and the other one's Bryant or something like that. So he's a big Alabama fan. But he's got Longhorn in his blood. You see where I'm going with that, right?
Yeah. There's something that seems wrong about Longhorns named after Bear Bryant, but that's another discussion. Exactly.
Actually, I think I got their names wrong, but it doesn't matter. It has some kind of Alabama affiliation. But I digress. My surviving brother Tony. But I digress. Obviously, that's not what I got in this with you about. Man, we're in some strange times right now in regards to the NIL, the transfer portal, and all that kind of rigmarole. But before I get into that with you, because you've got, like I say, you cover the waterfront when it comes to especially college football stuff going on, from coaches' jobs, coaches' vacancies getting filled, to just what's going on with the NCAA, what's not going on with the NCAA, and all that kind of stuff. But before we get into that, you had an interesting take this week on the recently held draft. I'm talking about the NFL draft, and where you kind of ranked the colleges from a point standpoint on what kind of effective or input draft they had, and just kind of fill people in with that. Obviously, you had to have Georgia number one because they had 15 guys taken. It seemed like everybody on their defense got taken. I'm interesting to see how good their defense is going to be this year. Just kind of give people a little insight on that top six, because I think Ohio State was number 6 with only 6 guys taken. Explain to people how that happened, but go ahead.
Yeah, so, I mean, for years I would get frustrated at, it was basically just preschool arithmetic. Well, this team had 8 guys drafted, this team had 7 guys drafted, this team had 6, so therefore the team with 8 had drafted. But as we all know, the idea of the NFL draft is that the picks are not created equally. It's a staircase, and as you go on, you're a little bit lower in value. So my idea is I finally decided to do something about it. And the grand formula is basically the first pick is worth 250 points. The second pick's worth 249 and 248, and down we go until.
Wait a minute, that's very complicated. Now go ahead.
Yeah, it had to be complicated for a Longhorn graduate, or it had to be so simple, or I couldn't understand it myself. So
I know you read out of fingers and toes. I know what you're talking about, but go ahead now.
Yeah, so eventually, once you get down to late 7th round, you'd rather have a guy drafted than not, obviously, but is it really that great of an accomplishment if your guy's a 258th draft pick? He's not the same as a first draft pick and shouldn't count the same. Yeah. So last year I started doing it. I really wish I had started, 5-10 years ago, but I started with the 2021 draft. Yeah. And this year's again. And each year I'm interested in the findings, like Georgia obviously won the draft for 2,304. I call them selection points. But their draft came in behind, LSU's 2020 draft, and then that I think it was the 2004 Ohio State class. Yeah, both of those classes had 14 guys, and they had higher selection points because I think 3 of Georgia's guys were 7th rounders. So great that they're drafted, but not really all that valuable in the long grand scheme of things. They're a coin flip team and make their team out of camp. Yeah, and then for second place, Alabama had 7 picks, but they had 1,366 selection points. I'm scrolling over here to my cheat sheet. I wish I could tell you I had all this stuff memorized. But
no, go ahead, man.
When you have multiple first rounders, that's worth more than multiple, even 5 or 6 second rounders. Sure. And then Cincinnati, came in 3rd ahead of LSU with 10. Cincinnati had 1,302 points. LSU at 10 had 1,185. Where I think it gets real interesting is for example, USC had 3 picks and Florida had 3 picks, but their sandwich around them is Ole Miss with 6, because their guys were taken higher. And, those picks are more valuable. So we value them higher in our system. And so, it's nothing groundbreaking, as I wrote in the original piece announcing it last year, I'm suspicious that I'm even the first person to even think of this because it's such a simple thing. But I think it gives us some good insights, not only into who won this year's draft, but I think it helps us settle some arguments from years past as well.
Yeah, and what's curious about it, I had Thayer Munford. I expected Thayer Munford from Ohio State to go anywhere from the 4th to the 6th round. He went in the 7th round. If he'd gone in the 6th, Ohio State would have been 5th on your ranking with just 6 guys taken. Because obviously that run of wide receivers. I thought Jameson Williams, he should have, half of his points should have gone to Ohio State, don't you think? I mean, really?
Exactly. I mean, the Texas people were saying, USC, Keontae Ingram counted. He spent 3 years. That counts for us. We get at least half a point. But his 12th pick was 249 points. All those go to Alabama. Yeah.
Well, this is what's curious to me, though. I'm looking at right now. It's like you took the national champions over the last many years, going back at least 20 years to the 2002 Miami team. I'm talking about looking at the top 10 here. The 2020 LSU, it's not necessarily they're national champions, but these are remnants. Some of these drafts are remnants of what was those championship teams. But the 2020 LSU team has had 14 draft picks so far for 2,383 points. Number 2 on that is the 2016 Ohio State draft. I think the draft, but it was the 2014 and 15 guys, like Joey Bosa, et cetera, were taken in that from the 2014 national championship team. They had 12 draft picks so far with 2,351 points. That's the number 2 ranked, team of teams who have won national championships. And, in the Ohio State, the 2004 draft with Ohio State had 14 players taken for 1,999. That's ranked number 5. And of course, those were remnants of that 2002 national championship team. It's funny. Ohio State, in my opinion, had better teams in 2003 and 2015 than maybe the year before, except they had crap that happened, and kept them from playing for the championship one way or the other. But I think it's a great way of looking back on some of these programs and seeing just the depth of some of those, because you actually call out the national championship teams, in particular, the 2017 Alabama team, overall, over the years that they were eligible for the draft, had 39 players drafted for number one based on your rankings. 2001 Miami, 38 players taken. 2015 Alabama national championship, 34. 2014 Ohio State national championship team, 30. And those are your top 4 with the points included. And it does kind of put in perspective the blue bloods, doesn't it, to a certain extent, and who's no longer a blue blood.
Yeah. I mean, I think my formula had 2017 Alabama ahead of that 01 Miami team after last year. And they had with a lower number of draft picks. And then this past year, I think they had 2 guys that were on that team that were still sticking around at 2021 that put them over the Hurricanes in terms of total draft picks. But I mean, there's 600 points ahead in total points. So it's going to be interesting to follow moving forward if this Georgia team can pass them, or maybe the 2022 national champion Buckeyes can pass them. I think they've certainly set a standard for just depth of talent. I mean, you look at that team, I've got them right over here. I mean, you've got, let's see, in the 2018, they had the number 11 pick, the number 13 pick, 22, 26, 93. Then you go to the 2019 draft, they had Quentin Williams went 3rd, Jonah Williams went 11th, Josh Jacobs went 20th, Irv Smith went 50th. Then the 2020 draft, you had Tua went 5th, Jedrick Wills went 10th, Henry Ruggs 12th, Jerry Jeudy 15th, and then 2021, you had Devontae Smith went 10, Alex Jones went 15, Mac Jones went 15, Alex Leatherwood went 17, Najee Harris went 24. Yeah. And then they had 2 more guys taken this past year. I mean, just the amount of top 10 picks, top 50 picks is just, obviously it's unmatched. It's astounding to think all those guys were really on the same team. And then to think that, like, they were lucky to win that game. I don't think they were actually winning that game until Tua threw that fateful rainbow pass. And then, we can get into that Rose Bowl that Oklahoma and Georgia had when, my theory is that if Oklahoma holds on to win that Rose Bowl, they match up better with Georgia than with Alabama than Georgia did. They might have not even won that national championship, but with all that unbelievable talent on that team.
Yeah. Hey, can you call up that 2014 Ohio State? Have you got that on that same list?
Yes.
Right there?
Let's see. So you had 2014 Ohio State. You had that year. It was the 2015 draft was a small draft class. You had Delvin Smith with 37. Jeff Hourman, is that how you say his name?
Yeah,
92.
Hourman, yeah.
Yeah, Dorian Grant went 121. Then you had a couple guys go 180. And then it was that next draft that had Bosa at 3, Zeke at 4, Eli Apple at 10, Taylor Decker at 16, Darren Lee at 20, Michael Thomas at 47, Von Bell at 61, Adolphus Washington 80, Braxton Miller 85, Nick Bennett 94, Josh Perry 102. I mean, it just went. Cardale Jones was the lowest guy drafted at 139.
Crazy.
Still in the top, close to the top half of that draft.
And just think if Cardale Jones had left after the national championship game, he might have been one of the top 5 players taken. You know what I mean? The way in that 15 draft is crazy.
I know. I mean, obviously the juniors or the sophomores carried that team. In 2017, you had 7 guys taken. You had Marshawn Lattimore, Malik Hooker, Garyon Conley, Curtis Samuel at 40. At 18, you had 5 more guys. Billy Price at 21, Tyquan Lewis at 64, and then 19, 2 more guys. Paris Campbell went 59th, and Terry McLaurin went 76.
Yeah, crazy. Wow. Well, anyway, hey, real quick before we go, before I move on to the next thing, what did you think about? Do you think the draft? Like I always have guys on pre-draft. Like I had Albert Breer on from Monday Morning Quarterback, and we talked about this. I brought it up. It's funny after you get past the top 2 or 3 rounds, though, how teams have already zeroed in on who they're after. You know what I mean? And it's not, the draft doesn't. I think you agree with me with this. The draft doesn't necessarily reflect an exact top to bottom pick of the available talent. Agreed? I mean, because some teams just fall in love with a guy or fall out of love with a guy and take somebody else. But that is another factor. You kind of have to weigh into that, isn't it, a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, once you get past the top 100, I mean, there's a reason those guys are still there.
Yeah.
And so each team you're looking for, well, we need a tight end. Okay, here's the tight ends available. This guy is not perfect in this direction. This guy's not perfect in this direction. So, are we going to take the guy that's coachable, that's maybe not as big and strong, or are we going to take the guy that's bigger and stronger that didn't have the production? It's certainly, there's a lot of that aspect to it. And then once you get to the 7th round, you kind of don't want to be drafted because at that point, you have more options if you're an undrafted free agent. So the draft certainly isn't perfect, but it's the most perfect evaluation tool we have here for college football.
Yeah, I agree with that about the 7th round. I always tell players, I go, the only thing that's good for you that you got drafted in the 7th round, the one thing is that they did draft you, meaning, nobody likes to admit they make mistakes, just like in recruiting. You know what I mean? That's why the recruited guy always gets a little bit of more of an edge than the preferred walk-on, so to speak. But it is interesting. Hey, real quick, before we move on, I wanted to throw this at you too. Have you ever heard of a wide receiver room or any other room, position room, having a night like the 2020 Ohio State wide receiver room had with going in order? Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, and Jameson Williams, who transferred obviously to Alabama for the 2021 season. They went in order. What was that? 9, 10, and 11, or 10, 11, and 12. I get them mixed up in my head, but that was crazy, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think I guess you could put the Georgia defensive line room, the guys they had, led by Trayvon Walker, going number 1. And then you go back to that 2017 Ohio State team, or the 2017 Alabama team, the wide receivers that they had.
Yeah.
Ruggs, Judy, Smith. I mean, I'd love to. I think it'll be fun to compare the success, the NFL success those two groups had. And then I think, at one time Alabama's quarterback room had Mac Jones, Tua Tagovailoa, and then Jalen Hurts as well.
Yeah, Jalen Hurts, yeah.
And then,
exactly.
So, that's a ridiculous amount of talent as well. And then Oklahoma at one time had Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray, 2 Heisman winners. So I certainly think that Ohio State group belongs in that. I mean, clearly, I'm probably in the majority here when I say that Jackson Smith and Jigba is the best of those guys, and he's still in college. So it's just obscene amount of talent that Ohio State has.
And keep in mind, a guy, you may have heard of his dad, Marvin Harrison Jr. Keep him in mind. And Emeka Egbuka is going to be a star. I mean, you saw him a little bit last year returning kicks and in the Rose Bowl. They got as I said, they got their bonus spring game by getting to play those guys when the 2 guys, Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, opted out of that game. But yeah, it's crazy what Brian Hartline's put together. I think you agree with that, don't you?
Yeah. I mean, Jackson Smith and Jigba just about won that Rose Bowl by himself as much as one wide receiver can, but any catches he didn't make, I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. was right there. I mean, I think, what do you have, like 180 yards? Like an outstanding game.
A couple of touchdowns.
Something like that. Yeah. Not even close to leading his team in receiving yards.
Yeah, it's crazy. Hey, let's move on real quick because we're in the craziest time in college football history, modern, ancient, whatever you want to look at. And like I told you, I was looking on your timeline, FootballScoop.com, but basically on your the Twitter timeline today. And like I said, you guys ran a story about Nebraska, about Scott Frost getting in trouble for using, basically summing it up here, basically using quality controls or graduate assistants or analysts to help coach, for want of another term. During a couple of years ago, the NCAA looked into that, and obviously that's, quote, a no-no, end quote. If somebody's looking over your shoulder, but they got put on probation for that. I think Scott Frost even got a 1-year show cause penalty, if I'm not mistaken about that.
And a 5-day suspension.
Yeah, and they're paying some other penalties, including some guys have already missed some coaching time, some guys who will miss. But on the same timeline, just a few clicks down the road, is how the NCAA is looking at relaxing or doing away with those kind of regulations on quality control coaches, graduate assistants, which can help coach, by the way, but analysts, basically doing away with any idea that they can't help coach. It's a weird time we live in, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the perfect example of what we're living in right now. That the rule that Scott Frost and Nebraska got in trouble for, 6 months from now, maybe even less than that, might not even be a rule anymore.
Yeah,
it's kind of like Kelvin Sampson got fired at Indiana for breaking a rule that's not a rule anymore. It's changing, incredibly fast, changing by the hour, and it just seems like, in particular, I think the removing the cap on countable coaches. Obviously, everybody figures if they remove the rule January 1st, January 2nd, Nick Saban's going to have 5 different salaried offensive line coaches, and they're all going to make $1 million a year. And I guess if he does that, so be it. But, we hear from so many coaches that are just burnt out, trying to, looking for ways out of the business, because what they're asked to do is just, beyond what one person can do and keep a healthy, functional life together.
Yeah.
I mean, with all the recruiting that has to be done, changing, opening up the spring recruiting like they did a few years ago makes recruiting more of a 12-month thing. The portal's close to a 12-month thing. Like these guys need help. And so to be able to let analysts coach on the field can lessen some of that load for your position coaches. And at the same time, you can hire guys who basically are just traveling salesmen for you and just recruit. Certainly if you're an assistant coach listening to this, you're going to be expected to go on the road. You're going to be expected to put in the hours, grinding the tape, evaluating practice, evaluating your opponent. But this will at least lessen that, so that hopefully good people aren't leaving the business to go coach in the NFL or just leaving it entirely. We need to keep, good men coaching. It's an important job. So hopefully, I'm sure we'll get abused, but hopefully in the long run, it will keep more people in the profession.
Zach, a couple of years ago, I said that the transfer portal is going to just change everything about college football, about big-time college sports. And then you add on top of that now the NIL, and now they, of course, the name, image, and likeness situation, which is almost running amok as we speak. Maybe it'll find some balance, maybe it won't. But when you put those two together, like you were talking about with coaches not only have to recruit, but they have to re-recruit now, and now, used to be bag men, but now you've got legal guys putting together deals for big time college football and college basketball players. And, a great example, that's what's going on at the University of Miami right now with the player who's basically threatening to leave unless he gets a better NIL deal, from one of the guys down there that's kind of like handing out those kind of situations, almost like, I'm not going to say candy, but it's almost close to that. But yeah, where do you think this is going, man?
Yeah, I mean, I'm almost kind of surprised we didn't see more of that. The situation with Miami basketball, Isaiah Wong, and then you had Jordan Addison, the Pitt receiver who, looks like he's going to USC. I'm really surprised we didn't see more of that because at this point, you can, the deadline was Sunday night. If you're an all-conference player, you got to have someone in here saying, hey, enter the portal. Your school's you're not going to lose your scholarship at your school. Just see who's out there, see what you can get, and then maybe your school matches it. You come back and you made yourself who knows how much money, or maybe someone else values you more. Go play for Alabama, Georgia. Like, I'm really surprised, we didn't see just imagine if Bryce Young had entered the portal last night. And so, Michigan will pay me $5 million, or LSU will pay me this, A&M will pay me this. I'm really surprised we didn't see something like that.
Yeah.
But I think right now we're just in the growing pains of the era where players had no freedom at all, and then now I consider myself to be a player's advocate, but they've got too much freedom right now. And so I think the only way out of this, from where I sit, certainly Greg Sankey hasn't called me and asked for my advice. But the only way out of this I see is to just go all the way in the other direction and just fully professionalize it, sign them to contracts, guarantee them some money. Maybe you limit how much they can make or when they can access it, and you limit their movement. This is a 3-year deal. You got to stay here all 3 years. And then after that, you're free or whatever. And then you got to get a players union. And then at that point, it's collectively bargained. And then at that point, any gripes that players have is with their own union and not with the laws, and this coach is mean to me, or the AD is being mean to me, or the governors, I don't like the laws we've written. It's, hey, talk to your union at that point. But I think we're getting there, but there's so many people that aren't ready to have that conversation. Until then, it's the Wild West.
And by the way, some of you are touching on when you're talking about the Miami basketball player, that's holding out, so to speak. I think the reason you didn't see a lot of that in college, I don't think people didn't think of it. You know what I mean? I think that's coming. I mean, it's funny you brought that up because that's exactly what I'm thinking. Next year, about this time, I think it's going to be a real free-for-all from the standpoint of, I can always go back to where I was, but my toe is in the water. Let's see what you got, and that's got to happen, doesn't it?
Yeah, and unfortunately, we the NCAA published some numbers last week that showed that entering the portal is, if you're a rank and file player, it's a bad idea. It's an astounding number of guys that they found, according to their numbers, were still in the portal, or they were on scholarship somewhere and transferred somewhere else without a scholarship. So you really got to know your worth. And, a lot of guys don't find out what their coaches really think of them until it's too late.
Yeah. Well, that's what I said a while ago. You got to re-recruit the guys you've already got. But then, like you said, the reason they don't necessarily want to turn the tap off totally is there obviously players leave. You could say they're encouraged, or they're being told, hey, you know what, boy, it's just not working out here. You maybe ought to try the portal as opposed to just kicking a guy, to the curb. I think a lot of that goes on, obviously, as you look around some of the major programs, right? I mean, so they don't necessarily want to lose the ability to do that and come out looking okay.
Right. And anybody that complains about the portal is at the same time doing the same thing that they complain about. Like the five-star offensive lineman, Josh Connerly, who was one of those late deciders, looked like everybody was going to go, all the experts were predicting USC, and there was a late flip to Oregon. And everyone thinks, oh, he probably got an NIL deal. Well, then now USC turns around and does the same thing to Pitt with Jordan Addison. And then over the weekend, I had an FCS coach DM me saying, I don't feel sorry for Pitt. Their quarterback tried to get our tight end, last week. Like he sent him a DM, tried to get him here. So anybody that's complaining about it, they're probably telling the truth, but they're also probably not telling the whole truth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Kind of like the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial right now. But that's another story. Hey, last thing for you, man. Is it amazing, because you kind of created this niche for yourself here with FootballScoop.com, and is it amazing the interest that just keeps growing? And I think it's, like I said, I think it's going to, you're exploiting a situation that's even going to grow bigger for you with all the stuff, all the news that's going on 24/7 now. But did you envision this, 5 or 6, 8, 10 years ago when you were first getting into this?
Well, yeah. I mean, for me personally, I knew from early on that I was a college football nerd without much talent elsewhere. So I better figure out a way to make a career of this. Otherwise, it's going to be a rough road for me. So I've been lucky so far, knock on wood. But, when I started this job, or family members asked me, like, oh, you're a college football writer. Yeah. So what do you write about in the off season? There is no off season. There's times when games are going and there's times when there's no games, but there's really no off season. I mean, we've been saying that for a long time, but I mean, it's even more so now. Like, we get slow moments here and there, but they're really just moments. And I mean, I'm not sitting here complaining. Like the schedule, the amount of time that coaches put into this stuff and putting their paychecks on the line with what happens, every weekend. Like, a lot of people begrudge the money that college coaches make. I do not. Like those guys, whatever they get paid, they earn it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just coming out of the trees. You know what I mean? I mean, there are guys down in the lesser divisions, past the Power Five, that aren't making anywhere near the money, that those guys are. Hey, I wanted to run one other quick thing by you. It is amazing. I had Eddie George on my podcast a few weeks ago, celebrating basically his first full year as Tennessee State head coach. You see what Coach Prime has done down at Jackson State, but there are more opportunities than ever for some college football players, right, to find their paradise, because they really like that HBCU. They like the opportunities the HBCU offers them. I'm talking about Eddie and Prime, but to have those kind of guys running those kind of programs, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I will have to say that the Deion story has been, I've been doing this 10 years now. The Deion story has been probably one of the top 3 most interesting, stories I've covered in my time doing this. Like, we were early on that story. We knew, we had a Jackson State source tell us, months before it actually happened that, hey, it looks like Deion's going to be our head coach. Of course, he was a Cowboy. I grew up with him, watching him on the Cowboys. And then, he'd been in coaching like high school football. He had the Prime Prep Academy. Like, that ended in disaster. And I was like, okay, we'll follow this, and he'll be out of a job 6 games in, piss everybody off. And the guy has, proven everyone wrong at every turn. Like so far, he's done everything he said he was going to do. Like he said he was going to fill Veteran Memorial Stadium, and he's done that. Like he's built a team. They have the number 1 player in the country. They won the SWAC. Like he's got other guys, Eddie George coaching in the SWAC. Like, we had a story, John Bryce wrote a story for us about the opportunities that lower guys are getting to move up and, take fellowships in the NFL because more people are paying attention to SWAC football. Like he's totally rejuvenated, HBCU football right now. And it's been just fascinating to watch, and I hope it continues. And I certainly hope it has a happy ending because it's great for the sport.
By the way, I was going to correct one thing. I think Tennessee State's in the Ohio Valley Conference.
Yeah, I was going to.
Yeah, but they have,
because I think it was Howard
right
that just moved to CAA. Like, that's the Big Ten of the FCS.
But they have aspirations to move up to division. FBS. Down the road, and I think we'll see. Be interesting to see where Prime goes with all this. But hey, Zach Barnett of FootballScoop.com. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not just a must read every day. It's a must read once an hour, right? Did I have that right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. My wife would very much appreciate it if everyone read the site once an hour.
Anybody wants to send a donation his way, do that, ladies and gentlemen. Hey, Zach, appreciate you joining the Tim May podcast, my man.
Tim, thank you for having me. It was fun.
And ladies and gentlemen, until next week, I'll see you then.